Okay, welcome back to another episode of the RAG Report podcast, my daily bulletin show where I bring to you recruitment owners, leaders, suppliers, advisors, even investors around the world who are prepared to give up some of their time to share both experience, expertise, knowledge, ideas, really just help us all navigate through this new digital world we are faced post-COVID-19 and come through it all together stronger. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Dave Savage. Dave is a director at Harvey Nash Group. He's a guy I've known for a few years now. We've done a little bit of work together. He's also the founder of the Tech Talks podcast, which is a really, really interesting, successful show that is in partnership with Harvey Nash. And if I'm looking at any person in especially the UK market that I think has really stood out from an innovation perspective, then Dave is one of them. So I'm really interested to find out why, how, what, and what life's like in lockdown. Before I do, I want to mention our sponsor, Rise Recruitment Ventures. Rise are a recruitment investment business who are helping the next generation of leaders, owners in recruitment to scale and exit their business for a big return. The guys did it themselves. They sold after 10 years from 2 of them in a bedroom to 140 staff, 20 million valuation. And they're doing it again with new people. So if you're a recruitment owner or soon to be owner, and you would like support in both capital and expertise to grow a world-class sellable organization, then get in touch. The place to go is www.riserv.co.uk, and you can find out more. Right, back to the show. Dave, welcome to the RAG Report.
How you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I bet it's a bit odd for you to be on the other side of the fence, right? Usually asking the question.
Yeah, I've had a couple like these during lockdown. And yeah, it is. I don't like it.
Well, if at any point you want to turn the tables, mate, and get a bit into more comfortable to do it. I was on a show. I was on a podcast recently. Yeah, it was there's a guy called Adam Posner in the US in New York, and he's like the opposite of me. He's an ex-marketeer who owns now a recruitment business for marketing, like for agencies and brands. And he's got his own show, the podcast. So he was on the RAG on the Tuesday. We were then on a combined webinar on the Wednesday, and then I was on his podcast on the Thursday, and we were both sick of each other by the end of the week. But being on the other side, I mean, I quite enjoyed it, but I don't shut up very much, so it was quite easy. But Dave, I've given you a little intro, but what I want to ask first, just paint the pictures for the listeners. What is your life like today? What the hell's going on in your world right now?
Well, I'm in the lucky position that my job hasn't massively changed.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis, I am responsible for putting out a podcast that I started as a kind of a passion project off the side of my desk 5 years ago that became my full-time job 2 years ago. So getting Tech Talks out there, 2 episodes a week. I also do some work with some external brands. So there's plenty of events that I've worked with over a number of years now that were going to be physical, now going to be virtual, obviously. So I've been hosting Q&A sessions, virtual events, and ran a few masterclasses on presenting, which was very bizarre. Getting asked to talk to a whole load of CIOs and CTOs about the arts of presenting and interviewing, kind of massive imposter syndrome. But my job, because it's content-based, has not really changed. No. The only difference is that I'm not going and meeting people when I'm interviewing them. But day-by-day basis, finding interesting content, interviewing people, editing it, publishing it, the whole life cycle of getting the content out there and onto social channels and hopefully into people's ears.
Well, I mean, look, I completely understand that. As I said to you just off there, we went daily with the show in the lockdown, and you know, a lot of our customers as well not nearly all of our clients have been absolutely like raring with content. They've wanted to be pushing content more than ever. So I think the whole recruitment industry, I don't know if you've noticed on LinkedIn, but there's definitely like a real buoyant interest in marketing now that probably wasn't there a couple of years ago, probably wasn't there at the start of the year. Like, this has forced everyone to reevaluate their lives, how they work, where they work, and how can they reach people without doing the things they've always done.
Well, you know, a lot of recruitment still actually relied upon bumping into people physically at events, at bars, at pubs, in and about at London, coming in and out of offices. You would bump into clients, prospective clients, contacts, etc. All of that's gone, and the only channel that anyone's now got is through content and hopefully getting into people's feeds and getting them, getting 30 seconds of their time. And we know that the amount of time that people are spending in their feeds has gone up astronomically through lockdown. So it makes perfect sense that they're all interested in content. I suppose the difficulty is that there's been this avalanche, and there is also this concern that, you don't want to come off as tone deaf and get the content wrong. There's one thing being enthusiastic, and there's another thing being somewhat too much and the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think the Black Lives Matter campaign right now as well. I've seen a lot of people comment on that, and I was talking to someone yesterday, and they referenced a recruiter that made a pretty strong statement, about I think it was about Winston Churchill's statue being defaced or something, and got absolutely hammered on LinkedIn and deleted the post. And it is tough, especially with real political issues. It's really difficult. But it's still not a reason not to do it, right? You've got to get your foot out.
No, you got to get it right. It's just judging your content and making sure that you know who your audience is. I think the best way that it's been described to me in recent times is you've basically got to hack people's echo chambers. Right? We've all got our echo chambers. We all follow people that we want to follow. So you need to know what your audience is and get your content into that person's echo chamber. And what you effectively want to do is also make sure that people who you're not directing your content to, ignore it and scroll past it because you don't want to waste their time. There's a subtle difference between TV, where the entire family, you're trying to appeal to a mass market and get people to sit down and watch it together, versus podcasting, which is very personal, or, a video for that matter, and is very targeted to a particular demographic.
I completely subscribe to that methodology. I think there's people on LinkedIn and places now that get mad engagement, like really big engagement, but I don't know who from. It's very mass market. And how do you then translate that into revenue, sales, recruitment, whatever your business model is? I think it's difficult, right? I've always been very clear. My recruitment owner audience is who I care about, it's who I'm talking to, and I think it served me well. But look, let's go back in time a little bit. You've talked about you 5 years ago started this. So can you just give us a really quick, how long you were in recruitment, what was going on before you even thought about content?
So I've been at Harvey Nash for, hang on, where are we now? Coming up to 13 years. So I joined the firm in September 2007 as a resourcer.
Was that a graduate job, or did you have something?
Yeah. So I went to university. I studied politics and international relations for 3 years. Right. I didn't really know what to study. I just thought it might be interesting. And then I spent a year in the Students' Union as the University Sports and Societies president.
Right. I see you doing that.
Yeah, very kind of...
Very day savage.
In people's faces. Too much. No. And I fell into recruitment because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I'd kind of gone for a few jobs in the higher education sector and come up against kind of people who already had some experience, second and third choice. And I saw this ad that I didn't understand, and it turned out to be recruitment. There I was. So yeah, I started off as a contract recruiter, quickly found myself put in a position where I was a team leader, then I was a manager, and by the end of the time that I was a hands-on recruiter, I was managing 7 or 8 people, I guess. Then became hands-off, and that expanded a little bit more, and was looking after kind of 3 teams effectively in a contract book, indirectly, and directly of about 60, indirectly of about 160, and then various different perm clients, obviously across some markets. But roughly around 2015, I basically wanted to tap into the fact that I've always loved content. At university, I'd written for the student paper. I had a radio show that a couple of us did that like 3 people listened to, but whatever, we enjoyed doing it. And I wanted to kind of explore that creative side, and kind of pitch the idea of more of a digital role to work, and got politely told that if I wanted to do that, I needed to create it myself. And so, yeah, podcasting seemed like at the time, the only way that I could realistically, without any budget, without any barriers, create content, and in a way that not only generated content that was good for the community, because I thought that it would offer an opportunity for IT leaders to hear what other technology leaders were saying when they were maybe kind of had their heads down, and in delivery mode. And at the same time, obviously, was a wonderful opportunity for me to go out and build and expand on relationships.
You know what? Everything you said there rings so similar to me in terms of I wanted to be, as a kid, I always said I liked to be on the radio. Always said it. I just loved the thought of chatting for a living. Recruitment gave me that opportunity in a different way. I never actually went and did a student radio show. I know a mate of mine, Dave Masterman, you might have heard of him. He worked for XFM, then he produced the Chris Moore show. He now he works in Manchester for a multi-distribution show, and he manages the Radio 1 show on a Friday or something. Anyway, he had the Hallam FM studio at uni in Sheffield, and I always found that interesting. And then 2015 was when I started listening to podcasts, and seriously got in, it became like that every morning commute thing to do. I remember it. And I used to think it'd be amazing to have a show, but I don't know why. I felt like it was something that, I don't know, I didn't know every man could just start a podcast. I didn't know you could do that. In my head, it was like, you've got to be like a journalist, or you've got to have production teams and a business behind it. I didn't think too far ahead at that point. I just consumed a lot. So you thought, you did all this off your own back. You just said, right, let's come up, tech talks. Let's just do it was it doing it in the day at work, or did you do it at night? How did you even start the thing?
Well, I was quite lucky in that there was someone else at work at the time called Salma, who I know you also know, who we basically kind of said, oh yeah, that would be a good idea around about the same time. But she worked in bid writing, I worked on the recruitment side, and we kind of bounced ideas off each other. So it's useful having someone else who thought it was a good idea inside the organisation, just to give you a little bit of a positive nudge. But in terms of the content creation, going out and building something, I took it on my own back to effectively go to my existing clients and go, hey, I think this could be something good. Do you mind me coming and interviewing you? And leveraging the fact that I had a few relationships there that were willing to give me some time. I got one of our digital guys at work, our digital director, Derek Kelly, to help me in terms of setting up a SoundCloud and getting it kind of syndicated to iTunes, etc. And he helped me kind of build. Well, he built the website rather. I don't know how to build a website. I still don't know how to build a website. But he threw together a very basic website, and I went out and I created the content. I downloaded Audacity. I bought some very cheap microphones, and I just created these interviews. And they were long and rangy and pretty rubbish. They're still all online, but it was just sod it. Keep doing it. And, I've spoken to loads of podcasters over the years. David Breer, host of 11FS's FinTech Insiders, jumps to mind. And he was like, first 10 of anything that you're going to do are probably going to be pretty crap.
Yeah.
But it's about getting past that and actually doing it again and again and getting the consistency. And then you obviously learn over time.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring to your attention our second sponsor. That's Odro. Odro is calling on the recruitment industry in absence of organised events to take part in what's called the Active Recruiter Challenge. The idea is that we'll all get together on the same day, Friday, the 10th of July, to run either a 10K or a half marathon. This is a combined effort from all recruiters to run from their homes and follow any route you want up and down the country. We're hoping that together we can raise money for a Teenage Cancer Trust. And in order to do so, we want all runners to contribute £25 in sponsorship. Fitness and charity, what a combination. To get involved, sign up to the Active Recruiters Club on Strava, then join the 10K or the half marathon from there. Strava will then track our times so that we can use them and find out how we are competing with our friends and colleagues. There's also a runner's pack with numbers and wristbands, which will be sent out from Odro once you get involved. Finally, see Odro's Active Recruiters blog for full details. Everything will be shared in a link to this podcast.
I've spoken to loads of podcasters over the years. David Breer, host of 11FS's FinTech Insiders, jumps to mind. And he was like, first 10 of anything that you're going to do are probably going to be pretty crap.
Yeah.
But it's about getting past that and actually doing it again and again and getting the consistency. And then you obviously learn over time. Yeah,
100%. But I think the time you did it was a real early stage, wasn't it? Like podcasting.
Yeah.
Like even me, start of 2019, I feel like I got in at a good time. Whereas you got in at, when did you actually do you remember the date you recorded the first one?
No. The show started publishing somewhere towards the middle to the back end of 2016.
Yeah. So
it took me a long time to go from idea to actually getting something out there. And then I began to kind of get a bit ahead of steam about it.
And what was the biggest benefit in the early days?
Credibility, I suppose. I I genuinely wanted to find out more about the tech industry. And I think if you're a recruiter, it's about being authentic, and it's about being able to demonstrate that you really do have an interest in the market that you're working in, right? And I was able to start. When you go and pitch a client in recruitment, and you're a hands-on recruiter and that is your job, you rely on the anecdotes that you've got from previous roles that you filled, and giving market information and all of those other aspects to kind of build trust with the client. With the podcast, I was then able to go, oh, well, when we were talking about the market, you suddenly had all these stories in your head that all these founders and CTOs and CIOs had told you on the course of the podcast, and you're able to go, oh, well, actually, this firm are thinking this and this firm are thinking that, and actually, this is what's going on in the market, and I know that because I've spoken to these 4 or 5 different people. So immediately, it elevated the conversations that I could have with people, and the value that I could offer them in terms of what was going on out there beyond just their particular environment.
What about from a BD perspective, like being able to?
Well, that fed into it because I was able to have much better meetings.
Yeah. Just inviting someone on a show is a different game than saying, let's have a meeting and talk about your recruitment requirements.
Yeah. And at the time it was totally novel, right? Like you said, it was very early. I didn't choose podcasts because I thought podcasts were going to blow up. I chose podcasts because it was the only thing I could afford to do. If I could have afforded to do a video channel at the time, probably would have thought YouTube, but it's far harder to get people on camera. And the editing involved is obviously suddenly becomes a lot more expensive. But yeah, inviting someone to have that kind of a conversation is completely different. And at the time, no one was doing it.
No, it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. I wish I could have started mine earlier, but I'm still happy with when I did.
Yeah.
So how did the job progress then? Because you were still a recruiter at that point. So how did you manage the two? How did you keep the lights on in you and keep performing at the level that I know Harvey Nash would expect, but also build this audience, this new content strategy? Well,
any recruiter will know that you're targeted in one way or another to go out and to have meetings. And for me, that was my meetings, kind of
carrying kit road.
Well, at the time, it was just a phone, to be perfectly honest. I mean, at times I've had a phone on a wad of paper towels to try and act as a dampener. It didn't matter. It was very, very low tech indeed. But it wasn't a problem because it was my way of getting out and networking and meeting people and building relationships. It was my way of booking meetings. So it very neatly kind of slipped into the day-to-day duties of being a recruiter, whilst not being disingenuous to one or the other.
A message from our final sponsor, Vincere. Vincere, if you don't know, is the all-in-one CRM ATS platform for recruitment and staffing businesses globally. Now, I first heard about Vincere, it feels like a while, it was about a year or so ago. And this business came out of nowhere from speaking to recruitment agencies. And I've always asked them what CRM they use when dealing with them from a Hoxo perspective. The same players usually used to come up, but this word Vincere kept coming up. And I was like, okay, I've heard this 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It must be an interesting brand. And now I hear Vincere almost as much as any other brand out there. So I did my research, and what I love about Vincere is they're looking to partner and invest in the same types of organizations that Hoxo do, which is the future high growth recruitment business, what I call progressive owners. These guys are putting a product out there to level the playing field and help smaller businesses and those growing to edge over their competition. It's proven to be a disruptor in the space. More and more people are using this software globally. They recently broke into the G2 Crowd Momentum Grid as the market leader on stellar reviews from users. So the recruiters that are using Vincere are raving about it. They've got 5 global offices, headquartered in Vietnam. So if you've got an office anywhere in the world, they've got this follow the sun methodology. So the support is absolutely top notch. And also by sponsoring the RAG, they're giving a unique offer to our listeners. So if you're listening and you want to get involved, go to Vincere, that's vincere.io/RAG, where they're going to be offering you a unique exclusive deal because you listen to the RAG podcast. Get in touch today. When did you start? What was the first moment, though, you thought this could become something more than just a meeting booking engine?
I suppose when people started contacting me asking to be on the show, that moment where you kind of go from, I'm going out, initially, as I said, I went to clients, pre-existing clients, and said, hey, can I get you on this show? And they're like, yeah, okay, fine. All right. I know you, I'll give you an opportunity. And then, maybe 10 or 15 shows in, you begin to approach people and you've got a bit of a portfolio and a little website, and you can kind of go, oh, I'll run this thing, please listen to it. And the hit rate on people being interested would begin to go up over time. But I think I began to realize that there was some real interest when, first of all, PR started getting in touch and pitching their clients to the show. And then I suppose the other big tipping point, which is actually not, it was a fairly recent one, as in the last few years, when people started asking me to speak at conferences, and where you kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not an expert. Why am I getting asked to speak on this conference with a whole load of tech leaders? So, oh well.
So what was the first experience you had in that world?
What was the first conference I did now? I can't remember the first conference I did. The first one where I was genuinely like, this is odd, was AI and Big Data Expo at Olympia, which was only in the spring of 2019. But it was the first one where I did a keynote session on AI to a room full of experts. And I just thought, this is bonkers. I'm getting up on stage in front of a whole load of room of techies with a politics degree, giving a 15-minute talk about what's going on in the AI market.
How did you even position that? Is it more of a what I know from the podcast chat?
Well, exactly, and that's why people are interested in talking to me, because I'm now in this position. As of today, 308 episodes out, and I have spoken at and hosted multiple events over time. So actually, when I get put in that situation, the one thing that you have, if you're a podcaster, if you're a content creator, you might not be working in it, but you shouldn't try and purport yourself to be a technical expert. That is absolutely not what I am. But what I do know is that I have a really nice holistic view of what's going on across the whole industry in a way that actually many people can't compete with. Only really journalists go out there and speak to everybody and can join up the dots to say, actually, this is what's going on across all these different places.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was your? Can you remember what your favorite episode was in the early days? Like when did you? Can you remember? Is there any standout episodes you can remember? Like for me, I've got one I talked about recently, Tony Kokoza, in my first season, where she opened me up on the show, and I was interviewing her, right? But it felt like she was interviewing me, and we had this really strong connection. We were chatting. We really opened up to the point where it was quite emotional, and at the end of it, we were like, "Can we really release that?" Like it was, but it went so well, and we had so much press off the back of it, and she won clients, we won clients, but more than anything else, people just genuinely enjoyed it, and that still will always be the pivotal moment. I was like, I fucking love doing this. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've had one or two chats where they've been quite rooted in my own personal experience. The show. A podcast doesn't have necessarily an editorial slant when you start it, and it's an idea, it's a passion project off the side of your desk. It's just a way to create content, right? And it's only over time that we've built in themes of, right, actually we've got a platform now and people are listening. We need to talk about stuff that we care about. So we need to talk about responsible leadership. We need to talk about inclusion, etc. And I've had people on the show, and we've been speaking about the transgender community and minority groups that aren't necessarily that well understood or talked about. And my dad's transgender, and you kind of get into those conversations and you begin to share a little bit more than you necessarily thought you would. But it means something because it's rooted in there's something that's rooted in your personal background that matters. The other one that stands out from a pure point of view of, oh man, I really wish that I had better ideas, was when we were interviewing What Three Words, kind of God knows how many years ago it was now. It's an old episode. And Claire, their COO at the time, basically told us the idea of what Three Words is, which is this app that can pinpoint to any particular position on the planet using just 3 unique words. They've created a global address book. And you kind of went, such a simple idea. And yet it can be used by Domino's and the UN disaster recovery app. It's so easy to kind of see what the commercial and non-commercial opportunities are for that. And you go, man, like I could have had that idea. Yeah. You realize that some of this is not that complicated. It's just right moment, right time, ability to execute, and the simplicity of it. And some of the things that have really surprised me are just how simple some technology solutions are.
Who's the biggest name you've interviewed so far? Any real household brands or names you'd know?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few people who are well known. I mean, Dr. Sue Black was on the show, who's within tech certainly is a bit of a well known figure. She's been on Desert Island Discs, for example, on Channel 4. She does work with likes of Facebook and so on, and tech Tech Mums is well regarded. I've had members of Parliament from the Science and Technology Committee talking about the government's approach to tech. So we've had some fairly high-profile people from that regard. I've never really chased names per se. Some of the best episodes are people that you haven't heard of, you just stumble across, and you end up having really interesting conversations. But yeah, no, we like I said, Darren from Parliament, Dr. Sue Black, amazing when you get an opportunity to speak to these people. Yeah, for sure.
One thing I think most of my audience probably thinking if they're listening now is like, it all sounds great, but what do recruitment owners always want to know about? ROI. What's gone on? Like, so it's kind of two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you go full-time and stop recruiting? And what has the impact been from the podcast? So you answer it in however you want.
I think there was a realization from my boss, Andy Hayes, that it played to my strengths, which I think is an important thing, right? When you're an MD or a manager of any business, you look at the people that you've got and you kind of go, this person might be okay doing this role, but actually they're really good at this thing. I am crap at admin. I was a contract recruiter and I am crap at admin.
Yeah.
That's not my strong point. Whereas content creation and talking to people and building relationships and branding and those kind of bits and pieces are my strengths. So I genuinely think that he didn't think it would be a massive loss to the business to pull me out of the recruitment role and to go, look, really focus on this. It's doing stuff. I think that the business probably would have wanted more business from this over time. I mean, I've gone out and interviewed 300 plus people. I'm not the best necessarily at keeping in touch with all the people that I've spoken to over time. That's a bit of a challenge when you start getting into kind of, because it's 308 episodes, but we've had episodes where we've had multiple people, or we've gone to a conference like Web Summit and had like 10 people on a snippet kind of thing. So we've probably interviewed more than 400 people. It's quite difficult to track that, especially when you're bad at admin. But last year it brought in about 600 grand's worth of revenue, and not because we were selling, but just because you were out there having conversations with people. And if you do it for the right reasons and you're genuinely trying to add some value and create some content for the community, you will get yourself in positions where you're having just peer-to-peer conversations rather than recruiter and client. And they, opportunities you will stumble across that you can go, oh, hey, well, would you mind having a conversation with the organization I work with? So it's a very long-term kind of goal in terms of building relationships that can add some value in that regard. But if you do it right, then it will lead to stuff that's beneficial, and in a way that doesn't feel like it begins to impact the ethical kind of stuff that underpins the podcast itself.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think there's definitely going to be, or there already is, a growing podcast community coming from the recruitment industry now. And
yeah,
I think if they're going out there with the pure focus of making money off the back of it, like it's a complete BD tool. I think people can see.
People see through that. Yeah,
people see through it. If you're genuinely interested in your market, you're interested in creating content that adds value without always an agenda, then I think there's still loads of opportunity in every niche. There's plenty of opportunity. What's been the approach to lockdown from your perspective? You said you've not got
from me personally or work more generally.
More from about like the show and the direction of the show. So, for example, my show went from telling stories of people's growth journeys and recruitment agencies, and feeling actually at the time of lockdown that was a little bit insensitive. It was like, do you really want to hear about how Harvey Nash grown to hundreds of millions? Well, not really. No, people want to know how to survive what the hell's happening. So I went out and interviewed people that were experts and advisors, and I tried to go, if you're giving one or two recruitment agencies the advice, let's give it everyone. And then that's evolved. You can't keep doing that either. So for me now, it's more news, future, where are we heading in this digital world? What's your journey been like over the last few months?
Well, it's interesting because the approach that you've taken there is one that I've heard echoed by some of the biggest names in the industry. So I interviewed Secret Leaders for another show recently, and Secret Leaders is the number one business podcast in the UK. Million downloads to their latest series, or their fourth series rather. They had a fifth series ready to go, and they shelved it and put together a series called Secret Leaders in Crisis that was specifically about how do we deal with what's going on right now. I didn't really do that with Tech Talks. I think the conversations naturally have changed slightly, and the type of content that we're looking for is a bit different. So we've spoken to a lot of companies who've pivoted, and they've had to think about their services and think about what they're offering. And, some interesting themes have come out of that. Like, it's about living your values right now. It's not about selling. It's about helping your existing clients. It's about being there, making sure that those customers come through this crisis with you. And I think those conversations have been natural. They've organically come up over the course of the last 3 months. So I haven't fundamentally altered the makeup of the show. But at the same time, I've sought out people that I think might be interesting right now. So, for example, I'm about to interview in the next couple of days the CIO of Williams F1, and we'll coincide that with the start of the Formula One season. Wow. The restart. Start. No, it hasn't even started, has it?
F1 companies are tech companies, really, aren't they? It's all about companies that produce cars.
So it's stuff that's topical and it's stuff that feels relevant right now. And where we go on the other side of this, I don't know, because the one other thing that we've been able to do right now is interview people in all sorts of locations. I mean, the whole idea of you being location based in any industry is beginning to fall apart slightly. So I think that might be an interesting thing.
Was your show always face to face before?
Not always, but it was definitely what I preferred.
Yeah.
But I don't think actually it not being has held it back in any respect.
Yeah,
and 17% of our audience is US. We have more listeners in Spain and Germany and Ireland than we do in the UK outside of London.
Really? Wow.
So, we have to cater for an international audience now.
I did a show yesterday in just outside LA, so in the Orange County, right? And I've done Australia. I've really been able to open the doors. China, Hong Kong, and before it was come to the office in London. The quality was amazing. The experience was great, but it definitely gave me more options doing it this way. And again, I don't think it's affected the listeners either. So to wrap up, there's going to be a lot of people out there thinking about doing this. They're going to be listening. The industry is shifting towards marketing being a major part of the business in recruitment agencies. What advice would you give anyone that's thinking about creating a podcast in the future, or even just going on more of a content community building type journey?
Well, I think your content, if you're thinking about a broader piece around marketing, digital marketing and content, it has to be stuff that helps. To your point, you changed the content behind the show because you wanted it to feel like it was relevant and that it was helping people. Harvey Nash, for example, we've got this platform called Your Tomorrow, which is stories of placements from candidates, of their experience of being placed through lockdown. And it's their personal accounts all around digital onboarding and how that's been and how that's worked and what's not worked, right? So stuff like that is entirely relevant to the new realities that we find ourselves in. I think if you're starting a podcast, first of all, ask why. What are the reasons behind me starting a podcast? Like before we were saying, if it's because you feel that everyone has a podcast and you really should be out there and you need to be creating some content, it's probably not the right reason. If you were going to start a content channel and it's going to be consistent and regular and people are going to listen to it, well, aside from anything else at its very core, you need to be doing it because you want to be having those conversations and you're passionate about it. A lot of people that you speak to when they've started podcasts, they've started a podcast about a particular subject because they're interested in it and they've gone out there and they've looked for that particular bit of content and not found it, so they've created it themselves. So I think you need to really have a clear understanding about why you're doing something like this rather than just doing it as a tick the box exercise. And that's the same with any content. You don't make videos just because it's a tick the box, we need a video. and it just ends up sitting on a website. No one watches it.
100%. 100%. Well, Dave, thanks for taking the time out, mate. It's always a pleasure. I love what you do. I've been obviously watching it. We helped you out a little bit at the beginning, and
yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely you're flying a flag that hopefully the industry will keep an eye on, and I want more people to see what you're doing. If anyone does want to reach out and ask you any questions, you're open to giving a bit of love, bit of info.
Absolutely, yes. I apologize if I take any time getting back to you. As I said, I'm terrible with admin, but LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, they're all there.
I always say that to people, like, I'll always come back to you, just don't know when, because I'll get back to you. But again, I'm never been an admin guy. But look, I'll make sure you're tagged in everything. Thanks so much for taking the time out, and good luck with everything in the next few months.
Cheers, Sean. You too.
Guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. As I say every single day, if you're enjoying it, please do one thing. Share this show with someone in your network. I don't ask for you to pay to listen. I ask you to share with someone you think will benefit. So if you know another recruitment owner or a colleague who seems like they might be interested in what Dave's got to say, get it out there, share it. And the more that people listen, the more as an industry we come together and we learn from the ideas that are coming out and popping up globally. I'll be back again tomorrow with more insights, more information. In the meantime, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.